So I want to welcome everyone that's here or that's listening throughout the world. We have now followers literally in every time zone that follow us on the different Zooms or Facebooks and YouTube. So we wish everyone a good evening that's here, a good morning for some, and a good afternoon for others. A very happy and meaningful Thanksgiving to all. I want to start with this story that was in the newspapers a number of years ago. One of the finest and most celebrated classical musicians of all modern times is a violinist by the name of Joshua Bell. At the age of 17, Joshua Bell made his debut at Carnegie Hall. 17 years old at Carnegie Hall. And since then, he has performed with the world's greatest symphony orchestras and conductors. His concerts are always sold out. People are willing to pay hundreds of dollars to see him play live. And every concert finishes with standing ovation after standing ovation, encore after encore. The violin that he uses is, if I pronounce this correctly, a Stradivarius. It was made in 1713. And he bought this at an auction for $3.5 million. That's the instrument that he plays. Why am I telling you about Joshua Bell? Why am I opening with that story? Well, some 16, 17 years ago, a journalist with the Washington Post, his name was Gene Weingarten, decided to conduct an interesting social experiment. And he approached Joshua Bell with this idea. And to his delight, Joshua Bell liked the idea and said, let's do it. What was the idea? Friday, January 12th, 2007. It happened to be 2 days after Joshua Bell accepted the Avery Fisher Prize. That's the greatest honor a classical musician in America can receive. 2 days after that, Bell shows up at exactly 7:51 a.m. at the Mall of the Washington, D.C. Metro Station. He wasn't dressed in his tuxedo. He was wearing a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and a Washington Nationals baseball hat. He pretended to be this lowly street performer. He opens his violin case, puts the case on the floor, puts a few coins in there, some nickels, dimes, and quarters, and takes this $3.5 million violin, puts it under his chin, and he begins to play. The pieces that he played were not some simple popular songs. They were some of the most complex and breathtaking musical masterpieces that have been around for centuries. He put his heart and soul into the music as if he was playing at Carnegie Hall. He produced some of the most elegant notes from this magnificent instrument. He played 6 different pieces over a period of time of 43 minutes. This is in the thick of rush hour traffic. Everything is being videotaped. This was Gene Weingarten's experiment. During the 43 minutes, exactly 1,097 people passed by. 7, a total of 7 stopped to hear the music for more than 60 seconds. Everyone else walked right by. Remember, they would be paying $1,000 for a front row seat in a theater for this. It's here being offered for free. 1,090 of the 1,097 walked straight by. 27 people tossed a coin in the violin case that housed a $3.5 million violin. The rest just rushed on through. Some of them giving Josh Bell a dirty look for being a nuisance in their subway station. Like, how dare he disturb the peace? And then Gene Weingarten published this story in the Washington Post. And it generated this very powerful response. It wasn't just a response of, hey, that's cute, that's funny. People realized what this experiment meant about them. Chances are we would have been a good part of that 1,090 people. And many said that when they read this piece, they started to cry. Because it affected them emotionally as to what does life really mean to us, that we're in this rush to get by, that we don't stop to hear the music. And we're talking about the music. Now, if we were to do an experiment within the experiment, let's suppose we can go to the 1,090 people, and we can interview some of them. And we would ask, why were you rushing through the station that morning? Simple question. Some would say they were going to work and they didn't want to miss the train, right? Some would say they were going shopping. Some might say they were going to the gym. Some might say they had a doctor's appointment. These would all be typical answers that we would hear from the people that just rushed on by. But what if after they gave us their answer, job, doctor's appointment, gym, shopping, school, what if we would then say, but why? Why were you going to work? Why were you going shopping? Why were you going to the doctor? Why are you going to school? Why are you going to the gym? They would answer, pick your answer. If they're going to work, they would say to earn a living. If they're going to the doctor, they would say for something that bothers them, right? If they're going to school, they would say for a degree. If they're going to the gym, to be in good shape. If they're going shopping, they would say there was a good sale. But what if after they gave us their answer, we would say, but why? And we would continue doing that with every answer they gave. We would say, but why? Now, they would get pretty much annoyed with us. But why? What do I mean by this why question? Is everything that we do just a preparation for something else? Do we go to first grade just so that we can go to second, so that we can go to third, so that we can graduate elementary school, so that we can graduate middle school, so that we can graduate high school, so that we can graduate college? Does it keep going? What's the ultimate? Why are we always pushing ourselves about tomorrow, about the next stage, about the next stage? As someone put it, sometimes life seems like one big laundromat. We bring in clothes, we toss them in the washer, we add some detergent, we put in some bleach, we put in a few coins, we throw it then into the dryer, we take them out, we fold them, we wear them, and a week later, we're putting it right back in the washing machine, and the cycle continues and continues. On the sixth day of creation, God said, let us make man. Familiar with that phrase? Let us make man. You know, he says, let there be light, and there was light. Let there be animals, there was animals. On the sixth day, he says, let us make man. And the question asked by every commentator on the Bible, who's the us? Who's let us make man? Who's the us? Who's he talking to? And the answer, there's many answers, but the answer I'd like to focus on tonight, us, you and me. He made us, human beings, the only beings endowed with freedom of choice to be his partners in fulfilling the purpose for creating the world. Let us make man. We're continuing that process that God started on the sixth day of creation. God invested in us. He invested within each and every single one of us a soul. The soul has the potential for us to continue to develop it. As long as we are drawing breath on this earth, we all have a purpose to fulfill, to impact this world. Every moment of life is a precious gift. And yet, for most of us, days can come and days can go with little or no consequence. Most days can be written off completely. Most days are forgotten, as if they've never happened at all. One day more, one day less. 1 week more, 1 week less. 1 month more, 1 month less. 1 year more, 1 year less. And at times 1 decade more, 1 decade less. Do we stop to listen to the music? Do we stop at that subway station when the music is playing and just stop and take it in? Or do we just continue rushing onto the train because we got to get to work, because we got to get to the store, because we got to get to the gym, because we have to, and we don't know how to stop? There was a great rabbi that lived in New York. His name was Rabbi Avram Pam. He was the headmaster of a very prominent yeshiva in Brooklyn called Torah Vadas. And once an elderly man in Rav Pam's community took ill and he was hospitalized. When Rav Pam heard that this fellow was hospitalized, he wrote a note, a letter, to him wishing him a recovery, that he should feel better, that he should get strong, that he should come out of the hospital. He wrote him a nice letter. And he sent it over to this patient in the hospital. The fellow got this letter and was so deeply touched that this man, this great dean of this huge school, took the time to write him a letter. He was so proud of the letter that he kept holding on to it. And anyone that would come visit him, he would say, "Look, Rav Pam wrote me a letter." And everyone would read the letter and he would just take it back. He kept it under his pillow. Literally, every visitor needed to read this letter and to hear about that he received a letter from Rav Pam. Several months later, this elderly man's condition took a turn for the worse, and unfortunately, he passed away. And at the funeral, his children spoke, and his children said how much this letter meant to him, that he received this letter from Rav Pam, and he was so honored by it, and he would show it to everyone. Now, later that week, someone that was at that funeral saw Rav Pam, and he said, "Do you know the impact that your letter made on this man? He was so happy that you sent it, so proud. He showed it to everyone. His kids spoke about it at his funeral." Rav Pam is listening to this and says, this is quite frightening to me. Frightening? Why are you frightened by it? You should be touched by it. He said, "No, it's quite frightening because it took me 5 minutes to write that letter. And now I hear how much that meant to him. That I invested 5 minutes of my life. And the impact that 5 minutes had on this man. And that it for months, this meant so much to him that he showed it to everyone." Why am I frightened? Because I wonder if when my time is up and I come to the heavenly world, God will hold this letter in front of me and say, 5 minutes is all it took. Why didn't you invest those 5 minutes for so many others? Look what you did for him. Why wouldn't you have done that for so many others? Every 5 minutes, what can you do? The lives you can change, the lives you can touch, instead of just rushing right by, because you gotta catch the train. Can you stop for 5 minutes? Because you can change a life in 5 minutes. Think about it. How much time and energy does it really take to do something sensitive that would bring cheer to someone else? Is it a text message to someone that you haven't reached out to in some time, just thinking about you? Is it a phone call? Is it what we used to do in the old-fashioned days before text? We would visit someone, remember that? How much out of the way is it for us to give some personal attention to someone? But we're so busy running, that we don't stop to play the music or to listen to the music. A wise person once said, the best thing in life are not things. So what are the best things in life? Family, and friendship and faith and gratitude and wisdom and knowledge, character, love, kindness, courage. Those are the essential ingredients that make up a meaningful life and a happy life, a truly happy life. They say, and I wasn't there to know, but they say that Sam Walton, who was a billionaire and CEO of Walmart, one of the largest corporations in America, he basically put his whole life into his business. And in that arena, he succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. But it came at a price, because he hardly spent any time with his wife, with his children, with his grandchildren. He didn't allow those moments of interaction, of connection, of celebration, because it was all business all the time. And they say that as he was lying on his deathbed, Walton struggled to get out his last words on earth. And his last words were, "I blew it." I blew it. Because he wasn't taking the billions and billions with him. And he had neglected those who meant the most to him. Life is short. And certain things live on and stay with us forever. But as Sam Walton found out a little too late, money and possessions is not one of them. What we leave behind are the friendships. That stays. You know, many of us are afraid of death. And some are terrified of it. And I think more than anything else, death scares us because we can't wrap our heads around the notion of being in a state of non-existence. That we're going to somehow disappear. That we're no longer going to have an awareness of our beings. That we no longer matter. That we'll be gone with the only trace of us ever having existed. We'll be confined to the memories of those who are still amongst the living. This thought of becoming nothing is frightening. That's if we believe that we're going to become nothing. But if we have a faith that life continues, and although we're in no rush to get to post-life experiences, it's not as frightening. I want to share with you a parable in the Medrash. It's an interesting parable. It tells us to imagine this, so try to imagine this with me. There's a pair of twins. They're resting comfortably in their mother's womb. Okay? And a pregnant woman, she's having twins. Their mouths are closed because they're being fed through tubes that enter their navels without having them exert any effort whatsoever. So they're being fed automatically. They're being kept warm in the fluids of the embryonic sac. This sac represents their entire existence. That's their world. They know no other world but this world that they're within. Everything is wonderful. Everything is peaceful. They're in a sheltered environment. As far as they're concerned, this is existence. There's nothing else. Now imagine that suddenly these twins are given the gift of consciousness. And they're able to think out loud and communicate just to each other. Okay, that's just a parable. It didn't really happen, okay? Maybe it did, but I'm not witness to it. They start realizing in their new state of consciousness that things change. Things are changing. There's movement going on. And slowly but surely they feel that there's turning and that they're slipping and they're going lower and they're growing. And they begin to wonder, where's this all heading? What's the future hold for us? The two brothers happen to have different personalities. One is an optimist, a believer by nature. The other is a pessimist, a skeptic by nature. These two brothers get into a debate. The believer says, I believe that there's a whole new life waiting for us after we leave this present home. I believe. He says to his brother, it doesn't make sense that God would have put us here for all these months, cared for us, fed us, allowed us to grow, allowed us to develop, only for it suddenly to come to an end. That doesn't make sense. Without any purpose, there must be a greater plan that we don't see right now. I am sure that very soon we're going to see a whole new stage. And this new stage will have a whole new meaning to our existence. There's no way that the only thing we have to look forward to is oblivion. His brother, on the other hand, is much more practical and realistic. So he says to his optimistic twin, there you go again. You're confusing your hopes with reality, your fantasies. Look around you. This is it. This is existence. Everything that allows us to live is right here. It's the womb, it's the sac, it's the umbilical cord, it's all right here. If we leave this place, it's over. Existence comes to an end. There's nothing else out there. The believing brother doesn't get discouraged. He explains patiently, no, once we leave this womb, we're going to be even more independent. We'll have other ways of getting around. We'll have other ways of getting food. We'll have other ways of getting nourishment. In fact, eventually we'll even be able to think and walk and talk and study and build and create things for ourselves. His brother mocks him. Where are you getting these fantasies? What movies have you been watching in there? The brother can't prove any of this, because it hasn't happened yet, but yet he believes with every fiber of his being that it's out there. This debate continues for weeks until one day it happens. The water inside the womb bursts. There's a great deal of pushing and pounding, and the twins realize they're being forced out. The believer is first to go. He's going down the canal. His brother is still inside. He's listening closely for what's happening to his brother. And he hears his brother give out a loud scream. And he says, you see, I was right all along. I just heard my poor brother scream in terror. It's the shout of death. It's the end of existence. And I'm next. What a tragedy. Of course, what the pessimistic twin does not hear are the joyful shouts of Mazel Tov that his mother and father are yelling outside as the first child comes into existence, comes into the world. The scream was not a scream of death, it was a scream of life. You get the parable? You understand what's being said to us? What appears from one limited perspective to be the end of life is actually the beginning of a higher form of existence. So too, says the Medrash, death is not an end of life. Death is a transition whereby our souls are granted the freedom to soar above the physical limitations of our bodies. This existence, this sac, is the world that we live in now. The world to come is even a greater freedom of expression, a greater freedom of understanding, a greater knowledge, a more blissful spiritual experience. But then again, if everything about our lives is defined by our bodies, if all we look at is the material, if all we look at is the physical, if everything about us is physical existence, if all we do is spend our days running from one place to the other, from the school to the office, from the gym to the doctor, from the supermarket to the mall, and we're consumed exclusively with our physical needs, then it becomes very difficult to imagine any existence outside of that. It's all about our bodies, then if the body is buried in the ground and decomposes and reverts to dust, then existence comes to an end. But if life has another element, if there's a soul, if there's a spiritual element, if there's purpose, if there's meaning, if there's God, who says it's over? The physical body may be over, but the soul lives on. The soul is your essence. If I was to ask you a simple question, who are you? You're going to tell me your name, and I'm going to say, your name doesn't tell me who you are. Your name is just what your parents decided to call you. You existed before they gave you a name. Who are you? And you'll start pointing, and I'm going to say, that's your hand. Who are you? And the more I ask you that question, the more you'll have to come to the realization that there is an essence of you. It's not the heart, it's not the brain, it's not any bone. The spark of you is your soul. That's not limited to body. That lives on. That has purpose. And just like the debate inside the womb, is this the end of existence or the beginning of existence? When we make our way to the other world, it's a transition from one world to the next. Somebody once approached Rabbi Abraham Twersky of blessed memory. He wrote so many wonderful books. He was a great rabbi and a great therapist and a great psychiatrist. He just great individual. If you want to read any of his works, Rabbi Abraham Twersky, he was once asked this very simple question. How do you know you have a soul? Everything I'm talking about, soul, essence. How do you know you have a soul? And I loved his answer. He said, I don't have a soul. I am a soul. I have a body. My soul is who I am. My soul has a body. God gave my soul a body. Why? Because in this existence, He wants me to walk. Well, if He wants me to walk, He has to give me feet. He wants me to use my hands, so He has to give me hands. He has to give me fingers. God gave my soul a body. I have a body. I am a soul. If we understand that our souls are the gift that God Himself breathed into us, as it says in the book of Genesis, that there is a divine essence within us that is our very identity, then you don't have to be a great mystic to infer that just as God is eternal, the soul of God is eternal and lives on. Death is the passing of the body. We mourn death, we're sad by death because we're going to miss the body of that person. Physically, we're not going to be able to embrace or talk to that person in words like we do today. But don't mistake death to mean the end of existence. We'll communicate in a different way, in a deeper way. We believe that there's an afterlife, an olam haba, a world to come. And we'll know more about it once we get there. We're in no rush. We'll find out. But for now, the practical relevance of the afterlife to our current state is simply for us to make sure that our actions in this life are taken with a sense of their eternal ramifications. The message being, make every moment count. Make every precious day on this earth count. Make sure to leave an impact that will outlive you, that will outlast your physical presence on this earth. The real tragedy of death is that it represents the closing of the curtain of our ability to do good deeds on earth. That's what comes to an end. We could no longer help someone. We could no longer feed someone. We could no longer inspire someone. We can't make them laugh. We can't embrace them. That part of the mission is over. And for that, there's sadness to the soul because it misses the impact it was able to have on their kind deeds, on their good deeds, on doing a mitzvah, doing a positive deed in this world. At that point in the heavenly world, we'll no longer have the free will to do good or to do the opposite. It's only what we bring to that moment that counts. We can't feed the poor once we're in heaven, but it's how many poor did you feed when you were on earth? That will be the question. So I would like to propose something, not in a depressing way, but on the contrary, perhaps in a galvanizing way for each of us. Over the last 20 to 25 years, there's been this phenomenon out there called bucket lists. Okay? What is a bucket list? People create this wish list of things they would like to do during the time they have on this earth. Or to put it more crassly, before they kick the bucket, which is how the word bucket list came about. I'm not comfortable with the word bucket list. I used it on the flyer because I figured it would catch some attention. I prefer that we call it life list. A list of things we want to do in life, but the world knows it as a bucket list. One time or another, we've all thought about the following question. If, God forbid, you were told that you only had a year to live, how would you spend that time you had left? What would you do? What would you say, and to whom would you say it? Whom would you visit, and who would you spend time with? How would you expend your last energy, your last time here on earth? It's a philosophical question. The good news is that, God willing, we'll all be granted many, many, many long, happy, healthy years. Decades. As we say in Yiddish, bis 120, until 120 years. But we don't have to wait till the 119th year to leave our mark. At any point, we can ask ourselves, if we were to have that 1 year, what would we do, and why aren't we doing that now? Why do we have to wait to year 119? So I propose to the audience here and to the audience out there in the world that's listening, as we prepare for Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is more than just the turkey and the trimmings. There's a deep message in Thanksgiving. It's a day of reflection about life and gratitude. What we have to be thankful for. It's actually a very deep day. It's a day of deep thinking and reflection. And then celebrated by having the family come together with a beautiful dinner. Why don't we sit down sometime in these days between now and Thanksgiving and compile our own list? A life list of things that we wish to accomplish while we're still very much alive. You know, there's these websites where people post their life lists, their bucket lists, and it's interesting to see what's on people's lists. I've seen a lot of people that want to swim with the dolphins. I have no idea why, but swimming with the dolphins, it's high up there on people's dream lists of things they want to do. I saw one that did catch my fancy, and I said, I think I can go along with that one. You know, my lifetime to visit every Major League Baseball stadium. I can go for that. I can start checking them off. I already started checking off the ones that I already did go to. How can I plan a trip one summer that will take me there?
You're a Yankee fan.
I know, but I like baseball. But let's put the exotic stuff aside. Not that your list shouldn't have any of the exotic, if it's really something that's important to you. Start with a notepad or a Word document, whatever you prefer, a laptop or just scribbling. And just start scribbling. At first, don't put deep thought into it, just start scribbling. What are those things that you really want to do? You wish you could learn a new language? Write it down. You want to play the harmonica for some reason? Write it down. You want to run up barefoot up the steps of the Lincoln Memorial? I don't know why, just do it. Write it down. But then after you finish with the fantasy parts, come back to your list. Start deleting the things that are the impossible stuff. You're not jumping out of an airplane. Well, some of you maybe are, but I could dream about it, but I'm not going to do it. And start fine-tuning it. Create a working document. But here's where I come in with some suggestions for you. Let's not devote the entire exercise to the frivolous, to the mundane, to the fantasies. Let's list goals that are meaningful, that will have an impact on others. I'd like to make some suggestions, and everyone is different, so they're merely suggestions. They're just thoughts. You can come up with your own. Establish a weekly ritual to speak with your parents and grandparents. And the best time would be Friday before sunset, before we light the Shabbat candles, but you can pick any time of the week. For those that don't have their parents and grandparents alive, it doesn't exclude you. Speak to them anyway, because they hear you. Every week, at least once a week, talk to your parents and your grandparents. If it means picking up a phone and speaking to them because they're alive, and do that. If it means visiting them because they live a block away, do that. If they're in the heavenly world, talk to them anyway. Once a week, we reach out and we tell our parents and grandparents how much they mean to us. Do you know what that means to them? The effect it has on them? Everyone is different on their own religious observance. And so for those that don't attend synagogue regularly, perhaps you just go Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Pick a Shabbat a week, just anyone on the calendar. Mark that day on the calendar and say, that Shabbat I'm going to a synagogue. You go to a synagogue more than that, put a few more dots on the calendar. You go once a month, go every other week. Everyone can just add on their own calendar that I would like to start going to a synagogue more often. Whether it's for prayer, whether it's for the social interaction with others, whether it's to meet people. But when we're in that synagogue life, there's so much kindness that can be done between us in a community.
And there's a good lunch.
And there's a good lunch. I'll throw out another idea. You know, we have many Jewish holidays on the calendar. There's the famous ones. There's the Rosh Hashanah, there's the Yom Kippur. There are those that don't get that much fame because we haven't marketed it as well. But they're in the Bible. Sukkot is a beautiful holiday. Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. Passover is pretty good, but do you know that there is more than just one night of Passover? There's 2 Passover Seders. There's also 2 days at the end of Passover that are holidays. There's a holiday called Shavuot that has 2 days. There's rabbinical holidays such as Hanukkah and Purim. What if you decide that 1 year in your life, pick a year, that year you're going to observe every Jewish holiday on the calendar. That's going to be Jewish holiday year. So that you will in your lifetime have experienced every one of these holidays. Now if you love it and you want to do it the following year, I won't stop you. But make the commitment that 1 year you're going to find out, you're going to study about every Jewish holiday, and in some type of way you'll observe it.
Donuts are so good.
Ladies and girls, make a fixed time or fixed ritual to light the Shabbat candles every Friday night. Especially now with what's going on in Israel. We want to bring light to the world. There's calendars that tell you every Friday night what time you're supposed to light the candles. It's a simple mitzvah, but it brings so much beauty. And for the boys and the men out there, mitzvah of tefillin is yours. As I've been saying recently, there's more tefillin that have been purchased in the last 40 days than at any other period of 40 days. Because everyone wants to express their Jewish pride and wants to feel connected to God Almighty at a period of time like this. Put that in your list. You want to buy your own pair of tefillin. You want to own your own pair of tefillin. You want to learn how to put it on. And you'll try putting it on as often as you possibly can. Now I know it's expensive. A pair of tefillin can cost. If there are people out there that really want to put on tefillin every day and cannot afford it, get in touch with me. I have a sponsor that will take care of it for you. That will cover the cost. As long as you're sincere about it and you want to do it. Those of you out there in Zoom land, you can get in touch with me, rabbi@chabadconejo.com. Let me know you'd like to learn about film and you'd like to take it upon yourself. And we'll be in touch. Here's another idea, and I say this at many different audiences to adults. Mentor someone. Mentor someone. Adopt a person in your life that you will mentor. Everyone can teach something to someone. Help guide these teenagers, these young adults that need some help to get through the challenges of life. You're good in a particular career, you have something to teach, find someone that could use your guidance. Mentor them. Be there for them. Use your experience, use your connections, use your friendships, use your know-how to put someone on the pathway of a career. Set aside time on a regular basis to visit with a lonely senior citizen. There's many, some of them living in senior homes, some of them in assisted living, some of them living just on their own in homes. Give up your time. With everything going on in Israel now, put on your list that when hostilities calm down and tourism is back on, that you're going to take a family trip to Israel. You know, I know it's costly, especially if you have a large family. My son recently got married in Israel. Got married right before Rosh Hashanah. When he and his bride told me that they want their wedding in Jerusalem, I started making the calculation in my mind. I have 8 children, Kenai Nahara. I have 10 grandchildren, Kenai Nahara. I got some son-in-laws, some daughter-in-laws. Wow. It was the most beautiful experience of our lives. I can take an equity loan and pay it off for the rest of my life, but it was worth it. Of spending time in the Holy Land, the land of our dreams, the land that our fathers dreamt about, that our grandparents can only think fantasy about would one day be back in our hands, that you can go to Jerusalem today with your children, grandchildren, that you can go to the Western Wall, that you can visit every part of Israel. Now I know during times of hostilities and tourism is down right now, so maybe it's not the time right now, but what if you put it on your list? This is a dream of mine that I'm going to fulfill, that I'm going to do. Put it down on your list. Our Holy Torah offers a treasure of wisdom, of knowledge, of inspiration, given to us as a sacred inheritance. Make knowledge of your heritage part of that list of yours. Many of us don't even know the names of the Jewish prophets, let alone what the books of the prophets are about. Many of us have never read the 5 books of Moses. We know there are 5 books. Can you even name the 5 books of Moses? We know the starting lineup of the Dodgers. Do we know the 5 books of Moses? Make it part of your existence. Make it part of your life. These are just suggestions. And each one, come up with your own. Some of these might resonate with you, realizing that formulating a life list is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. So find your passions. Identify your goals. Make your own mission statement in life. What does my life represent? What do I want it to represent? And be creative, and be imaginative, and be optimistic, but stay realistic. Make sure to include goals that are likely to be of lasting and enduring value. Because chances are, it won't be the stuff that you acquire or the adventures you enjoy, but it'll be the acts of goodness, of kindness, of meaning, of spirituality, of purpose that will ultimately introduce to the real answers of life as to what did our lives mean. The story is told of two close friends who, as the years passed, decided they wanted to do something in this world to leave their marks, to leave a lasting impression of themselves in this world after they would be moved on to the next world. And so they each decided to do something significant to perpetuate their memories. The first man, who was more affluent of the two, he had this huge obelisk, this magnificent pillar of rear marble. He had it cut from a quarry at a cost of $1 million. He then had his men engrave in big, bold, gold leaf letters upon this pillar, and he placed it upon a mountaintop for all to see. I'm not going to say it said Trump, but you get the idea, right?
What?
No, I'm saying the idea of putting your name up there on the top of everything, but we're not talking politics tonight. Not ever. And there this stone of marble with this man's name stood for years and years, an impressive, albeit pointless monument to a man and his wealth. Who did it benefit? So people knew his name. The second individual, not as wealthy, chose a very different way of being remembered. He dug a wellspring near a desert thoroughfare. He planted shady fruit trees and installed benches all around the flowing spring of refreshing mineral water. Over time, that spot became a beautiful and popular oasis where travelers from near and far would stop to quench their thirst, to enjoy the sweet fruit, and to rest in the cool shade. And for generations, people continued to benefit from the foresight of this wise and benevolent man. Who left the monument? Who left a legacy? The Talmud tells us that we don't build monuments for the virtuous, for their deeds are their true memorial. All of us should, and God willing, live long, happy, healthy, and prosperous years. But as practical and thinking human beings and conscientious Jews, it is perfectly appropriate to give thought to how we would want to be remembered years from now. What sort of legacies do we wish to leave behind? You see, our legacies are not shaped by what we might one day become. They're shaped by the actions that we take right now. I heard a beautiful saying, our lives are not measured in years. They are measured in the lives of people we touch around us. It's not how many years on the calendar we live. It's how many people's lives we touched, we affected. There's a man in our community, some of you may know him, his name is Martin Teitelbaum. Mart is a very skilled and successful developer, a contractor. He's built some major projects throughout Southern California. He was also the contractor who headed up the construction of this very facility. He built this building. We completed it in 2011. It's a project he invested a great deal of time and energy. A number of years ago, we had this event celebrating the anniversary of opening this center, and Marty got up and he said something rather striking. And I always remember this line. He said, building this center, Center for Jewish Life, was not among the biggest projects I've ever done. In fact, it was one of the smallest, but it was definitely the largest. What did he mean? He meant that among the many things about his life of which he is proud, spearheading the construction of this edifice will always loom largest. Moreover, he dedicated this building in the memory of his father, Irving Teitelbaum. He knows the nachas that he gave his father, and by extension his entire family, that he gave them a gift of eternity. Because it's not just a building that you rent out. It's a building that every day there's children, there's teens, there's adults, there's learning going on, there's praying going on, there's education going on, there's heritage going on. Not the biggest building he built, but the largest. Because it lives on forever. And this doesn't just belong to builders of buildings and dedicators of hospitals and parks and universities. It's all of us. Each of us in our own way. We can make an eternal and everlasting mark on this world. So perhaps another item on our life lists is to make sure that we think about leaving a Jewish legacy. When you do your estate planning, think about the enormous good you can do by including a bequest to continue the Jewish heritage. And this way you live on in all the goodness that will happen in wherever organization you decide that best expresses your feelings about Jewish heritage. So it's not a conversation about death, it's a conversation about life. It's about love for life and how we as Jews cherish and appreciate life. In fact, we're taught that attending to such matters in the prime of our life adds blessings to a long life. I'll share a story I heard about a man named Rabbi Leo Goldman. He was on a flight from Chicago to Detroit. And he noticed that a passenger coming on was this elderly Jew. And he was having a hard time getting his carry-on into the overhead compartment. So naturally, Rabbi Goldman jumps up and he asks the man, "Can I help you with the bag?" And, "Sure." And they get into a conversation. He asks the elderly man, "Where are you coming from?" And he said he was on his way home after having attended a relative's wedding in Chicago. He says, "Is it your grandson, your great-grandson?" He says, "No, just a distant relative." He says, "With all due respect, I can see that it's not easy for you to travel at your age. Couldn't you just send in the return card with regrets that you couldn't make it?" So he says, no. He rolls up his sleeve and he shows him the concentration numbers burnt into his skin. And he says, "Ever since the concentration camp, I will never miss an opportunity to dance at a relative's wedding. No matter how much of a struggle, no matter the schlep, I don't look at it as a burden. I don't just go to weddings. I've gone to every bris, every bar mitzvah, every bas mitzvah, a wedding of a cousin, of a nephew, of a niece, of a great nephew, a great niece. And you should see me there, because I'm on the dance floor with my cane and all. But I won't stop. I dance like I'm a teenager." Why? That's how I respond to Hitler. That's my answer. This is where history gets to see who laughs last. And then this elderly survivor says to Rabbi Goldman, "Let me tell you a story." So now you have a story within a story. After the war was over, when we were liberated, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. So I decided I want to go back to my hometown. I was from Vilna. I want to go to Vilna. Maybe there's some relatives still there. They didn't know how wiped out Europe was. Maybe I can find my house. Maybe some of my family belongings. I want to go to Vilna. How do you get to Vilna? There's no Ubers around. So he started a long journey. He knew the destination where he wanted to go. And along the way, others, "Where are you going?" "Also to Vilna." So the group, another few, each passing village. Some more Jews on their way to Vilna. It took a long time to get there. Turned out they had a group of now 200 making their way slowly but surely back to Vilna. When we arrived, we walked the streets. You could barely recognize the place. As was the case throughout Eastern Europe, by ridding Vilna of the Jews, the haters, whether they were Nazis, Russians, or the locals, drained these cities of their life forces, of the energy of these cities. The old neighborhood became this very dark, desolate, dismal place. It was at that point that someone in the group brought to our attention that night on the Jewish calendar was Shmini Atzeres, Simchat Torah. The holiday in which you dance with the Torah. That was that night. So, obviously, let's get to the synagogue. Let's celebrate Simchas Torah. They make their way to the synagogue and it's boarded up. They start ripping every board down to make their way inside. And upon entering, we couldn't believe the tragic sight that we saw. The ruin, the devastation, the desecration, the prayer books torn into pieces all over the floor, bullet holes in the walls, blood stains on the benches. We started cleaning up as best we could. We wanted to have our Simchat Torah celebration in our old synagogue in Vilna. After we cleaned up, we went to the Ark. And we opened the Ark. There was no Torahs there. It was empty. They ransacked the place. We were heartbroken because we wanted to dance with the Torahs, with our new freedom. Then I looked around the group. There were 200 of us in the group, most of them elderly. But amongst them, there were also two children that were coming along, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Children whose families somehow survived the extermination. 2 children in the group. And an idea came to mind. I started singing the song. And we formed a circle, we began to dance. We didn't have the Torahs to take out of the Ark, so we lifted the 2 children. And we danced with these 2 beautiful children. And with tears in our eyes, we cried out to God Almighty. We said, Master of Heaven, we have no scrolls of ink and parchment, but these are our Torah scrolls tonight. These are our living Torahs. And we danced the entire night from evening until morning with those smiling, happy children. And that night, the synagogue in Vilna came back to life again. No, it wasn't like the years before, but in many ways, it was deeper, it was stronger, it was brighter than anything we ever experienced in our lives, because in those moments of singing and dancing, of holding on to one another, and looking up at those children, we knew for a fact that in spite of everything that we have been through, Am Yisrael Chai. The Jewish people will live on. We go on. For as long as there are still children in this world to carry forth the torch of the Torah, we survive. We carry on. As long as there are children who will learn the lessons from our heritage, who will take these ideals and these truths and teach them to their children, then the light of Israel shall shine on as a beacon of hope, of goodness and decency for all of humanity for all time. That's the miracle of Jewish resiliency and continuity. That's the power, the impact of a Jewish legacy. The reason we're still here is because we recognize that Judaism is not merely a religion. It's not a lifestyle of the past. It's the hope of the future. It's the promise of the future. It's the guarantee of the future. Not only for the Jewish people, but for all of humanity. And that's why creating this life list is such an important exercise. I want to share a story I read that I found quite moving. It was a number of years ago. There was this beautiful young lady. Her name was Christina Chesterman. And Christina was killed by a drunk driver. She was riding her bicycle home after a long day of studying. She was only 21 years old at the time. She was about to graduate from nursing school. It was a terrible tragedy. A few weeks after her passing, her parents began the agonizing process of cleaning out her daughter's apartment. And while doing this, Christina's mother, her name is Sandra, she came across her daughter's makeup bag. When she opened the bag, she discovered that there was no makeup inside the makeup bag. Instead, there was a folded sheet of paper, and the paper had a heading on top, and it said, Christina's bucket list. Her mother was stunned. What kid makes a bucket list? As a matter of fact, from the paper, it showed that she started working on this years earlier when she was just 16 years old. She started putting together this list. Among the items on her list was that she wanted to tour Niagara Falls, that she wanted to save someone's life, that she wanted to find love, that she wanted to get married, that she wanted to have a family. She wrote that she wanted to run through a field of poppies. She wrote that she wanted to ride in a hot air balloon. All nice, sweet, wholesome goals. Never to be realized as her precious life was so abruptly and senselessly cut short. Suddenly her parents knew what they had to do. They decided that they would now fulfill Christina's bucket list. At least those items on the list that they could fulfill. So they went to Niagara Falls. They took pictures of it and they posted it. We went to Niagara Falls and they explained why they did it. And then some newscaster wanted to know what else was on Christina's bucket list. And that news show publicized it even more. And then it started spreading on social media. The story of this 21-year-old whose life was cut short by a drunk driver. And this was her bucket list, and her parents are going to fulfill every item on the bucket list. And so when they went running through the field of poppies, by that point it became a news story, a national news story. And when they went in a hot air balloon, there was cameras all over the place from every newscast showing this is how Christina's parents are honoring their daughter's bucket list. But then something else happened. Something quite amazing. As Christina's story began to spread across social media, other people decided that they too want to follow Christina's bucket list. And now you start having pictures of everyone running through poppy fields, going in a hot air balloon, all in honor of Christina. And it just went totally viral, not just in our country, but all over the world. Thousands of people, most of them total strangers, write to Sandra Chesterman every day, and they give them updates on the fulfillment of Christina's bucket list. I was very moved by this story and by the outpouring of love that came from all over the world to a set of grieving parents, because it gave them comfort. The idea of completing someone's life list for them is in fact what is asked of each of us for our own loved ones that are in the heavenly world. That's what we do. That's how we honor our parents, our grandparents that are no longer in this world. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, isn't that what the whole Torah really is? It's a living and breathing life list of the things we should strive to accomplish in our lifetime. So when we read the stories about the lives of our ancestors, they're not just nice stories about historical figures. They are dynamic mission statements that we are called upon to make our own. So if you save a life, you're checking off on Noah's life list, the things that Noah devoted his life to. And if you help someone who's hungry or support someone who's weary, that's Abraham and Sarah's life list. That's the mission statement that they left behind. And if you study from the Torah, that's part of Moshe's legacies that he left behind for us. And if you demonstrate pride and courage in your identity, that's the King David list. Isn't that our lives about living for the giants that came before us? Our parents, our grandparents, following in their ways, fulfilling what they perhaps could not fulfill in their lifetime? You see, my dear friends, once a soul passes on to the next world, it can't achieve further growth on its own. But there's one way. There's one way that even a departed soul can nevertheless achieve accomplishments in this world. That's if we do it for them. So remember, I started off by saying that once in the heavenly world you feel bad that you can't feed someone, that you can't help someone, that you can't make someone laugh, and that's their feeling of regret that they don't have that opportunity. We can bring them comfort when we do it for them. And we say, Zaidi and Bubby up there, or Tati and Mommy, or Abba and Ima, whatever you call your parents that are in the heavenly world, I'm doing this for you. And you have them in mind. When you do your good deed, there's nothing greater we can do for them. One postscript to all of this. Of all the lists and goals ever compiled in the history of the Jewish people, I don't know if any were quite as bold, as extensive, and as ambitious as the one that was set forth by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson. His mission statement was to reach out and touch somehow the lives of every single Jew on the face of the earth. The Rebbe set a goal to dispatch emissaries, to establish thousands of centers throughout the world. He launched campaign after campaign, and he stayed involved in each of these campaign initiatives with tenacious persistence that was beyond extraordinary. In everything the Rebbe did, and in every teaching that he shared, what always came across was his inner love for every single Jew on the face of the earth, and his deep concern for everyone. And yet, there's one item, one major item, on the Rebbe's life list of his goals that he set out to accomplish in his lifetime that he didn't get to check off during his physical lifetime. Indeed, it was on the 28th day of the month of Nisan in the year 5751, that's 1991. The Rebbe gave a monumental talk in which he stated that he's leaving this one huge item that was on his life list for all of us. And I quote from the Rebbe's words translated into English. I have done whatever I can to try to bring Mashiach, the Messiah. I am now giving the matter over to you. Please do what you can to make it a reality. Be stubborn, be persistent, and do not give up the quest. He left it for us, for this generation, to check off this final item that has been on the list of Jewish giants of history for thousands of years of our exile. That's the mandate of our generation. That's our mission. And we can complete it, and we can't rest until we do. The Rebbe spoke a lot about Mashiach. All of his life, but especially in the last years of his life. And there was this CNN reporter that came to see the Rebbe, and he asked the Rebbe, how can we do it? How can we make Mashiach happen? And the Rebbe said, not just to Jews, but to all of the world, increase in acts of goodness and kindness. Be good and be kind. Share with one another. Care for one another. Be giving, be charitable. That's ultimately what it's going to take to change this world. I'll conclude with this. As you know, I was on a solidarity mission to Israel right after the war broke out. And as I've explained it, it reminded me of Charles Dickens' opening of his book, Tale of Two Cities, where he says it was the worst of times, it was the best of times. Because on one hand, it was the worst of times. I mean, literally, we went house to house of people that lost loved ones in the massacre of October the 7th. We visited with many families of the hostages who live with grief every single day of the past 42 days, I believe it is. A grief that we can't fathom in our minds what it's like not to know what's happening with your child, with your brother, with your sister, with your spouse, in some cases with a parent or with a grandparent, with an infant. The pain was excruciating. Excruciating. From house to house, from minute to minute, and then to visit hospital after hospital. And people that lost arms and lost legs. I mean, just that much suffering. But I said I was reminded of Charles Dickens' opening line. It was the worst of times, but it was the best of times. I've never seen so much kindness in my life. I've never seen so much warmth in my life. I've never seen so much unity and brotherhood and sisterhood in my life. I've never seen a country come together as strong as I saw it during those days in Israel. Wherever you turned, there was kindness. Gushing kindness. You walked in the halls of hospitals and total strangers were coming in. What can we do to help? Constantly. And the hotel I stayed in was the evacuees of an entire kibbutz moved into this hotel that we were staying at. And literally, as soon as word got out in Jerusalem that this hotel was filled with evacuees, literally within minutes, people were coming in with clothing. People were coming in with toys for children. People were coming in with everything. Within a day or two, they were setting up a school in the hotel for these children. And this was happening everywhere. It became one family where suddenly all the reasons of divide and all the reasons of separation didn't exist anymore. It was the worst of times, but it was the best of times. When chesed, when kindness becomes the rule of the day, when kindness becomes the order of the day, where nothing else matters but being kind, you're experiencing a very, very different life, a different existence. Why it took such a tragedy to bring us to this point, I don't know. How we can keep this, how we must remember this feeling, that I do know. We need to speak it, we need to practice it, we need to talk about it and tell people. It's such a different existence when that's the focus of each and every day. How can we be kind today? Who can we help today? And I've said since I've come back, I've stayed in touch with all the organizations that I went around with and continue. I get their calls. This patient needs this person needs this, and we're funding it from here. If you want to participate in any of that, for those that are here live in the room, you have these pledge cards. You can participate in this campaign. For those out there in the social media world, go to chabadconejo.com/Israel. And whatever you give is going to go to increase kindness in the world, increase light in this world. Help out, whether it's a family of evacuees or a family of a hostage, whatever possible way that we can. But we got to increase light. We got to increase goodness. We got to change the world. One day at a time, 1 minute at a time, one kind deed at a time. And before we know it, we're going to check off that last thing on the list. We will bring the Messiah. We will bring Mashiach. There will be no more war in the world. No more suffering in the world. No more pain. No more illness. But only goodness and happiness and the Spirit of the God Almighty will reign throughout the world. We'll all feel it. All the people of all of God's children. It should happen speedily in our days. I want to wish everyone a very happy, a meaningful Thanksgiving. Have a good time writing your life lists. If you have any questions on it, ask your mom. She can be able to guide you more. But you could email me if you like as well. Give me a call once in a while. Be well, everyone. Thanks for coming.